I was in the dirt. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know if I was getting up, and I was alone. And it was unbelievably terrifying. This is a story of what happened, and I'm going to give you the 5 things or lessons that it forced me to learn. This is 8 fractures and a punctured lung and a medical system, what this taught me about myself and about leadership. So I'm in the dirt because my horse is spooked, and I was doing groundwork with her, just walking around. It was one of the first beautiful spring days in the beginning of March, and she spooked. And I think what happened is as she ran, she kicked out with her back legs, because what I felt was like a bomb, like a cannonball had exploded in my body, in my torso, my right side of my ribs. And I was down on the ground so fast. I was in the most excruciating pain I have ever felt in my life. Consider this coming from a person who has had a lot of different physical injury, torn ligaments, broken bones, 2 childbirths, and this was like nothing I had ever felt. And as I'm lying in the dirt, I had this fleeting thought of, am I going to get stepped on? Because I knew the horse was now freaking out and scared. But that quickly went away because I knew she was at the other end of the ring, and she's not a mean horse. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was scared. The second thing because the first thing was survival. Am I going to get stepped on further? Am I going to die right now? Because I felt like I was going to die. And then the next thing was just trying to breathe. I could barely breathe. I couldn't yell. I couldn't yell for help. There were people probably 200 to 400 meters away, and I couldn't yell. I was groaning in a guttural way, kind of rocking on the ground in the dirt. And I don't know how long I was like that. I don't know. I have no sense of time. It was surreal. And I realized that I needed to get to the hospital, and I needed to get to hospital and fast. And I also realized that my emergency contacts, I had no idea where they were. In having moved and living in a new place, I knew my daughter was at work, and I was supposed to pick her up in about 15 minutes from the time that this happened. And I knew that her dad, I think, was maybe out of the country, but I didn't know. And I knew that the other people I had in place for emergency contact, they were not. I have a system. I have an emergency action plan in my businesses for years. And I used to be a first responder years and years ago. So I always have an emergency action plan. That means having an emergency contact. And my neighbor was in Bali. My other emergency contact was on spring break. I was really feeling alone. There were other people at the barn on site. And at one point, I heard somebody yell, "Are you okay?" And I couldn't answer. I couldn't speak. And I was just finally got to my hands and knees somehow, because my first thought was, I have to get to the hospital, and I have to get Maeve to the hospital too. And I knew, having known the medical system for quite some time, I knew that if I called the ambulance, that it was likely going to be longer than it would take for me to get there, and that it might be way more painful. And I was in the most excruciating pain. Somehow I got to my hands and knees. I started crawling. Somehow I got myself up, and I started walking somehow back to the barn. And when I got in the barn and people saw me, and someone had gone and told someone else that something had happened. So they were like, do we need to call an ambulance? And I was like, I'm going straight to the hospital. And I don't remember how I got there, but I drove myself to the hospital. And when I got to the hospital and on my way, I left a message for my daughter and I said, get so-and-so, the manager of her barn, to drive you to the hospital. And it was the closest hospital to her and me. And I said, my ribs are broken for sure. I think my ribs are broken. Please get there. And then I tried calling her dad and I got no answer. And I called her back because I had only left her a message. I hadn't actually spoken to her and I didn't reach her. And then I called him again and I didn't reach him. So I was in a position where I didn't know if she was going to make it to the hospital. I didn't know if she got my message, and there was no one else that I knew that was in proximity that I could call. And I got to the hospital, and somehow the next thing I remember is getting myself into the emergency room. So I parked the vehicle, I walked in there, but I couldn't breathe. I could barely stand. And they knew it was bad right away, and they got me in immediately. But moving in any capacity was, it was like the most, it was like, it's like worse than knives stabbing in you. It's just the most excruciating pain you can imagine. And so I couldn't lie on a bed. I was sitting, they had to cut my shirt off of me. I kind of got my other shirt off. They were getting set up for x-rays. My daughter did end up getting there. She got the message. And a wonderfully warm physician came in and read the x-rays, and they had already shot me up with drugs and a needle in my arm. And he came in and looked at the x-rays. It's like, oh, I don't see a fracture. And I'm thinking to myself, I can guarantee my ribs are broken. And then finally he's like, oh yeah, there's a fracture here. Oh, there's another one here. He's like, it looks like you've got 3 broken ribs. And then he comes and talks to me. My daughter's there at this point. My shirt's cut open. I've got dirt all over me. My boots are off. And I can't lie down. I can't move. I'm just like trying to hold a position that I can shallowly breathe because I was having a hard time breathing. I was having a hard time holding a position. They gave me more drugs. He listened to my chest. And then I said, we were supposed to go to Mexico in 4 days. I said, I really need to go to, he said, were you going to go and rest on a beach? And I said, yes. And he said, you know, that travel, it's going to be super painful. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, I'm going to give you a bunch of hydromorphone. And I said, he said, you're going to need it for the travel. I'm like, we can travel? And he's like, yeah, I think you'll be okay. Just, you know, do you have any travel insurance? He said, you should get some travel insurance. And then he says, I said, is this addictive? And he said, oh, yes, it's an opioid, but you're going to need it for the travel. I'll give you enough to get you through the week for sure. And I was like, okay. And then he said, okay. And I said, okay. And he said, okay. I said, okay, I can go. And he's like, yeah, you can go. And I sat there for a second. He left the room and he was so kind. And he'd clearly been a physician for a very long time. And I sat there for a second looking at Maeve and thinking like, how am I going to get home? I can't move. The drugs are barely touching anything. I need to fill the prescription. There's nobody to call. And I was like, okay, I guess we're going. And I look and I see my boots on the floor and I can't move to get my boots. And I said, Maeve, I have to get out of here in my socks because I can't get my boots on. And she says, okay. And the nurse hears this and she's like, oh, here's some hospital socks for you. And they gave me some rubber grippy hospital socks. And I'm like, okay, awesome. And then I'm looking down, my shirt's cut open and I'm in my bra. And I'm like, is there something that I can cover myself with? And they're like, oh, here's a gown. So my 15-year-old daughter helps me out of the hospital as we walk. And when I say walk, I was in excruciating pain. And this is on a Monday, and we're supposed to fly to Mexico on a Thursday. And somehow I get into the truck and I can't even move the steering wheel. I had to have her, she's not old enough to drive. I had to have her help me steer, help me drive. And we drove 20 minutes to get into the town that we live in and get to the Shoppers Drug Mart. And I'm like, I can't get out of the vehicle. I'm like, you have to go in and get these opioids for me. Well, of course, opioids are on a time lock safe. And a 15-year-old is filling a prescription for opioids. So the pharmacist is calling me and I'm like, I can't get out of the truck. Like, I need you to give her these drugs to come to the truck. And they eventually did. And then we had to get home and I didn't know how I was going to get out of the vehicle because the pain I was in was unbelievable. I couldn't, somehow we got in the house. I couldn't undress myself. I couldn't wash my hands. She had to scoop water over my hands that couldn't leave my arms from my body. I mean, getting in or out of a bed or up and down from a chair was like, I couldn't scream, but the agony, like the groaning, the agony, it was like nothing I've ever witnessed. And I've seen people with horrific injuries, life-threatening injuries, and nothing I've ever felt. It was amazing. It was horrible. It was horrible. And I couldn't even reach to turn the light off at night. And and she's thinking we're still going to Mexico. And I'm thinking that, well, it has to get a lot better. I can't even pack a suitcase, let alone I couldn't go to the bathroom. I couldn't do anything. And so the next morning, I'm like, I need to check in with my doctor, my nurse practitioner. And so I did. And she said, you're not going anywhere. You need further diagnostics. There could be organ damage. And she says this to me, your ribs are broken. Your ribs 7 through 10 are broken. And I was like, no, the doctor said it was 10 through 12. She said, your ribs are broken. There's displaced fractures. There's bone fragments. You likely have organ damage. You need more diagnostics than a single angle x-ray. And she was so firm and so adamant about that. She's like, the person who diagnosed you should have their license taken away and you need to get more diagnostics. So I thought to myself, and by this point, I'm on opioids. I'm on Tylenol. I'm on every possible drug I can take because the pain is unbelievable and nothing's getting better. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm supposed to go to Mexico in 48 hours. So by this point, it's Wednesday morning, and I'm trying to get into a vehicle to get myself to get more diagnostics, to get more x-rays or a CT scan. And I can't get in a vehicle. I can't reach to get the garage door open. I can barely take a step on the stairs. I'm in so much unbelievable pain. And by this point, I'm getting stabbing pains into my chest and my breathing is getting worse. And I'm thinking like, I don't know what's going on here, but this is not good. And I try to get myself in the car and I realize I can't. And so I call 911. And in 911, I get put on hold. Without going into the details, I get put on hold. Then the ambulance goes to the wrong house. And then I have to beg the ambulance to do an override in order to go to a hospital that wasn't the closest hospital, but rather the one that has the diagnostics. And thankfully, they get that override. And if you hear me clearing my voice now, that's still because I have fluid in my lung because of what happened next. When I finally got to a hospital, once there, I realized that they were full. They were very busy because I was left in a room alone for a very long time. And I realized nobody's coming. Like I'm alone here. Finally, they sent me for an x-ray. Then they sent me for a second x-ray. And when they send me for a second x-ray, I'm realizing, oh, something's really not right here if I'm in emerge and they've sent me for a second x-ray. And then they get a line in my arm to send me for a CT scan. And then they won't let me eat because they're concerned they might have to put me in for surgery. And they're monitoring my vitals 24/7. And I'm messaging my daughter saying, like, we're not going to Mexico and I might not be coming home tonight because I'm in the hospital. And I don't know how my daughter's going to get taken care of. I'm literally calling friends. I'm calling neighbors. People were out of town. And in a position where I'm like, I need help. I don't know exactly the help I need. And yet I know I'm not getting what I need. And at least I'm finding out that they're discovering more things, but I don't know what they are because I'm in the dark and they keep feeding me more pain meds, but I don't know what's going on. And if I put my hand on my side, I could feel the crunching of the bones. I could feel the popping. Every breath I took, I can feel bones grinding and clicking across one another with every breath. And if I put my hand on my side, I could feel different places moving in different ways because there were so many fractures. And I didn't realize how many fractures there were until an emergency room doctor came in and said, no, you have 8 fractures. You have a hemothorax, which means there's blood in your lung. You have a pneumothorax. You have ribs 7 through 10 broken. We're trying to figure out if you need surgery. And they're consulting with a thoracic surgeon who's not on site. So they won't let me leave. And I'm feeling myself getting worse because I'm on so many pain meds and I've had nothing to eat. And I don't know if they're taking me in for surgery. And they finally admit me into the hospital after doing a heart ultrasound and saying that they're going to put me on oxygen. They're going to get me a respiratory therapist. They're going to get me a physiotherapist. They're going to put me through other x-rays in the morning. And they put me in a shared room with 2 people where I got no sleep at night. And I can feel myself getting worse. I'm more exhausted. I'm losing energy. I'm in so much pain, but they keep drugging me up with more pain meds. Because if I don't make the effort to breathe and do breathing exercises, my lung will collapse. And they're terrified of my lung collapsing. And I realize how unbelievably alone I am while I'm trying to make communication to people who can support me being at home, my daughter being at home. So here's the first lesson. And I'm going to start this lesson by saying, trust your own gut, trust your own signal. And I say this because how many times as a leader or as a parent or as a human being do you override your own internal signal, whether it's a gut feel, an internal check, because of an external voice, a voice that says something else, like you're fine, keep going. Maybe it's a boss, maybe it's a system, maybe it's a cultural expectation, but something says, you're fine, keep going. You're fine, keep going. And I knew I wasn't fine and something was off. And yet I had an emergency room physician say, you're fine. You can go on your trip to Mexico. It's all good. Take a bunch of pain meds. You're going to be good. And that first time that I had those same pain meds intravenously injected to me in the ER, or in the second ER after I called 911, I could viscerally feel how people get addicted to opioids. It relieved not only so much pain so I could at least breathe when you can't breathe physically and you're in unbelievable agony, but it also gave this relief of emotional and mental strain, the fear, the pressure. And I just went, oh, it was like the biggest sigh that I needed. And I felt it wash over my whole body. And that was like, oh, so this is what's possible. This feeling is what's possible. Feeling at ease, feeling like not pain-free, but feeling like I can at least breathe. That's how much pain it took away. And feeling like I could sigh because the pressures of the world were okay. But I didn't feel drugged or woozy. I just felt relief. And that's the moment that I thought, oh, yeah, I see why this can happen, this addiction kind of thing. But what I want you to trust is your own internal signal, because someone telling me that I was going to be okay and carry on, who's in an authority figure, who is an authority figure, is what had me go home and literally put my life at risk by not being cared for the way I needed to on that very first night. So here's a stat for you that I thought, I love the stats in the research. Every year, an estimated 795,000 Americans, this is a U.S. stat, die or are permanently disabled due to misdiagnosis because they trusted an authority in the room over potentially the authority inside themselves. That's often what happens, is they go with what the authority is. The second lesson is really that the authority bias that happens with a credentialed person, whether it's in the hospital or my x-rays, that could have killed me. And in every organization, whether it's a family, a community, a business, that authority bias silently operates. Teams don't speak up. Family members don't speak up. Leaders don't question up. The person with the title gets deferred to as the final say, even when they're wrong. And that's one of the things I primarily do, is help leaders see when they might be wrong and be able to learn how to question themselves, because people are going to defer to them. And in this particular case, it was life-threatening. So when we have a cognitive biases contribute to 74% of medical misdiagnoses. And that same psychology operates in every family, in every boardroom, in every team meeting. That same kind of bias towards an authority figure. So a credential is not a guarantee. I trusted 3 emergency room physicians, and 2 of them told me that I was going to have an x-ray in the morning, some physical therapy, some oxygen at night, and none of those things happened. And then a final was the 4th doctor and 5th doctor in the span after I stayed overnight in the hospital, then was telling me that I was stable overnight and that I needed to stay. And by this point, I wasn't going to trust anything that anyone was saying anymore. And I said, why? Why do I need to stay? And they said, you need to stay because we need to manage your pain. And I said, no, I can manage my pain at home. Tell me there's any other reason that I need to stay. If I need to stay because my life is at risk, I will stay. But I'm not recovering here. I'm not getting better here. I'm getting worse. So tell me why I need to stay. And he says, again, to manage your pain. I said, no, I can manage that at home. And so he leaves, they come back, and they give me a form to say that I'm refusing care. And I came back and I said, I refuse to sign this form. I didn't refuse care once. I didn't get the care. I didn't get the oxygen that was promised. The x-rays were delayed. I didn't get the physiotherapist or the respiratory therapist. None of those things happened. If I had seen a doctor and gotten any of those things, then I would have far more confidence. But I'm not signing a thing saying that I'm refusing care, because I didn't. And so I advocated for myself in that moment. And suddenly, when I wouldn't sign that form and I advocated for myself, suddenly a respiratory therapist came and a physiotherapist came, and the x-rays got analyzed, and they consulted with the thoracic surgeon again. And they decided to release me. And I was so grateful for that. But that wasn't going to happen unless I had finally stopped listening to the authority situation because I was trusting my gut. So that lesson number 1 and lesson number 2, 1, trust your own signal. I knew I couldn't go to Mexico. Number 2, the authority bias, it can cost you. It doesn't mean go against your boss every time. It doesn't mean buck the system every time. It means listen to your signal first, your gut. And then instead of just defaulting to the authority, don't be afraid to question the authority, because your contribution can make a real difference. In my case, it was a life-threatening situation. Number 3, this lesson. This one's hard for me because I love systems. And what the lesson here is that systems won't necessarily save you. I made it to the hospital and then wanted to relax because I made it there. I was like, okay, they've got me now, but they didn't have me. And I left that first hospital thinking that the doctor was right, only to find out that no, they misdiagnosed a number of things in my situation. Inadequate care, no rest, worsening instead of improving by the time I'd gotten to the second hospital and stayed overnight. And because I stayed stable enough that no one was acting on anything, the system that was designed to catch me caught me and then didn't help me. And I'm the person who advocates for leaning on systems all the time. When you're in a troubled situation, lean on your systems, create good systems and lean on them. And I do them every day. I lean on my system for my morning routine. I lean on my workout system. I lean on my food prep system. I lean on my standard operating procedures in all of my work, all of my business operations. I lean on systems all of the time. But if you are in a more extreme situation, the system won't save you. The system will hold you in place, and it may not be what you need depending on the context. So lean on systems, but don't expect them to save you, because systems will crumble under enough weight. This isn't about complaining about medicine. This is a universal truth, and anything that's institutional, anything that's systemic, it's built for the average case. It's not built for the extreme situation. So if you find yourself having the alarm bells within your body, within your head, knowing that something is off, knowing that something needs more, know that the system isn't going to save you, that you need to advocate for yourself. And that's what I did. I basically said, wait a second. No, I don't think so. I think I need to go home. I need these particular things. Help me do that. And finally, they listened because I was stubborn enough. Leaders often wait for the organization to develop them. Employees often wait for HR to support them. Teams often wait for a culture to fix them. The system is not coming to save you. Stop waiting for the system. You are the system. You create the system. And when the system is there supporting you, that's great. But when you need saving or you need something that's more than what a system provides, that's going to be up to you. You're going to have to advocate for yourself. Don't wait to be rescued by the structure. That's the most important lesson in this one. Lesson 4. This one is tough because I genuinely, going into this injury, this emergency, this situation, I felt like I was already at empty. My energy, just my overall tank, I knew I needed recovery. And my one simple light at the end of the tunnel was that trip to Mexico. I knew Maeve and I needed it. It had been a year of separation. It had been, I don't know, 6 to 8 months, I guess, by that point. No, maybe 8 months of going through divorce. And we had just gone through a massive home move. There was so much change, so much emotional pain, so much difficulty that we just wanted 10 days away to breathe, 10 days of distraction, of sunshine, of relaxation. And I felt like I was at my bottom, my end of my rope, I had bare minimum left in me. And the lesson here is that you are more capable than you can possibly realize. You have more in you than you will ever, hopefully, ever understand. Hopefully, you won't have to go through something that's so horrible as divorce or as an injury like this, but you are capable of so much more. I realized in that moment that I had this line in my head. I was like, oh, everything can always be worse than what it is. You think it's so bad, you think it's awful, it can certainly be a hell of a lot worse. And in that, what that means is that you're capable of more than you think. You've got more in you than you realize. You can do more than you ever thought you were capable of. No one should ever have to do it alone, but if you have to, you can. The human capacity under pressure is the most underestimated thing. Not that any one person should ever carry that kind of load. Here's the research I want to share with you. Psychologist George Bonanno at Columbia. This person spent decades studying human resilience. And what consistently shows up in his research is that we dramatically underestimate our ability to cope and recover from extreme adversity. The studies that they researched show that up to 75% of people confronted with irrevocable loss do not show the intense, prolonged distress we expect. What I want to leave you with is that you don't fully know what you're capable of until you're presented with no other option. And what it can feel like is both extremely terrifying and clarifying. And I want to really leave you with this message is you are capable of so much more than you can possibly know. It's there. It's within you. You've got it. And sometimes, unfortunately, and maybe fortunately too, it takes the most adverse circumstances to bring it out of us. But we've got it. It's there. It's within us. And this brings me to the last lesson, and this is lesson 5. Asking for help is a leadership skill. Asking for help is one of the hardest things to do for those of us who are extremely independent. And those of us who are extremely independent often became that way because we had to. We had to become independent. Either we lost people around us that we needed to rely on and they weren't there, so we needed to rely on ourselves, or we were in situations where we had to learn and adapt and become capable very early on. And those were some of the circumstances for me. But a huge leadership skill is to be able to ask for help and humbly do so. And realize that when you do ask for help, it is the most wonderful gift for someone else who gets to show up for an independent person. And please look back on the episode. I don't know the number of the episode right now, but it's all about independent people. It's all about how to help independent people, how independent people have a hard time asking for help. But most leaders are highly capable and highly independent. And the best leadership skill is knowing how to ask for help. I called the ambulance. I got to the hospital myself in the first go. And then I got myself home. And at the time, I didn't have someone to call. I'd already tried to call who was there. And then the second go, I ended up calling the ambulance myself. And I called that ambulance after trying to call someone else who's a friend to see if they were available, and they just weren't available. So I called an ambulance myself because I knew it was getting worse. I was having chest pain. I was having trouble breathing. And the pain was just getting worse, not better, no matter how many drugs I took. So I called the ambulance. That one act, choosing to reach out to someone, and then when they weren't available, reach out to the ambulance, saved my life. And it's amazing when I think about it, how hard that was for me to do, but how critical it was for me to do. So asking for help and not white knuckling through is the thing that will save your business, save your family, save yourself. It's not just about saving, it's about thriving, not just about surviving, but being able to perform your best. Asking for help is a critical leadership and life skill. It's not weakness. It can be the strongest thing that you can possibly do. It took strength to do that. Only 24% of senior leaders say they allow themselves to be vulnerable with others at work. The other 76% of leaders are performing because they're high functioning and performing strength in their position while quietly drowning. And that's what I almost did. I almost quietly drowned because of the difficulty, how hard it was to ask for help. But I did it. And thankfully I did, because I was in the right place to get the right support and then be able to be monitored and helped and reassessed. If I didn't go to that ambulance call, we wouldn't have known that my lung was punctured. We wouldn't have known how to adjust what was being done for the blood in my lung and the air in the pleural, the lung lining. That's not supposed to be there. That means that my lung could potentially collapse, and that puts pressure on the heart, and that could put a position of me dying. But because we found that, then they knew what to tell me to do, and the protocol changed. The protocol meant more drugs, force the lung open, force the breathing, no matter how painful it is. So I'm moving all of these 8 fractures around in order to try and open the lung. Hardest thing, but so necessary. Life-saving. This is life over limb. And that's the thing about asking for help. It's thriving over drowning. That's what asking for help means. Researcher Paul Zak found this is published in the Harvard Business Review, that when a leader asks for help, it actually raises the oxytocin. This is the feel-good hormone in your body. Raises the oxytocin in those around them, not in the person who asks for help, in the people that they're surrounded with. That's what happens. So what it means is that they biologically are building trust with the people around them and strengthening the social bonds. So if you feel and you felt like you can't ask for help because it shows weakness, or you feel like you can't ask for help because people are all leaning on you, and what would they do if they couldn't lean on you? Forget that nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Remember that by you asking for help, it's not only a gift to your team or your community or the people surrounding you, it is something that everyone benefits by, with trust, with social bonding, and with you not drowning, but you rather getting the support that you actually need. So, bringing it back to the dirt, lying in the dirt, groaning, not knowing if I was going to die, to now, I've learned so much. I've learned so much about pain, physical pain, emotional pain, asking for help. And I am sharing this so that you can take these lessons, these 5 lessons, and utilize them so that you don't have to feel like you're drowning, so that you can use them for life, for leadership, for anything that makes a real difference for you. And we're talking about listening to that signal, listening to your gut, not always defaulting to that authority bias, to know that the systems are there to lean on, but they're not going to freaking save you. And that you're more capable than you probably ever will fully understand. But you are. Hear that and know that. Finally, help. It's a leadership skill. Use it. Use it like it's that skill that you use every day. Use it. It's an amazing thing. The last question I want to ask you is, out of those 5 lessons, which one do you need to listen to the most? Are you ignoring a signal? Are you waiting for a system to save you? Are you constantly defaulting to some authority that's not serving you? Have you not asked for help in a decade because you don't think you can? Take a look at which one of those lessons you can be served by right now and share it with someone who could use this message. I didn't know I needed all these lessons, and yet I needed all these lessons. Again, I'm going to remind you, you're more capable than you know. Go be you. Be empowered. Let's go.